Cool. I think we're up and running. Okay, so as I was saying, I have a short description of a game idea I came up with a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Um, I have experience from college making game design docs, and I thought working with someone who does this, for a living or at least part time. I don't know how your background exactly, but we can go over that. But would be good to pair on it. I think it would be more motivating for me to have someone with your particular skills to work on this with. And it's kind of a casual side project. I don't know how many hours
Mhm.
exactly I'll be putting into it, but I think we could start with an hour or two today if you got the time, and
Sure,
then
absolutely.
in parallel or concurrently, yesterday I paired with Unity Dev, and
Hmm.
we had a session getting the game project set up for the prototype, and then at some point I'll probably meet with an artist, maybe an audio guy, and um,
Cool.
and work out a prototype at the very least. But at the end, if nothing comes out of this except some learning, that's fine with me too.
Okay. Excellent.
Um,
Great.
yep, and as I said, I'm just going to record this. I'll probably post it on my YouTube. I do tutorials sometimes, but mostly as a dev diary, and
Okay.
then at some point maybe I'll use it for other purposes. But for now, it's just like a dev diary.
Okay.
So let me share. We'll start by going over the game idea, unless you have anything else, anything to get out of the way, like in particular contract wise or anything like that.
No, 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 no. It seems no, absolutely. Let's just go
Okay.
for it.
All right, let's dive in. So I'm gonna create a version of this because I have like a giant doc with all my random ideas. I want to just pull this one out real quick and throw in a Google Drive file that we can pair on. Let me do that right now.
Okay.
Where should I put this? Let's see. For now, I'll put it here. Okay. So the name of the game is, at least right now, I'm calling it Pseudo Paradox. Um, and its main theme is time travel. It's I love time travel. I love gimmicky time travel movies, time travel in games. I've always liked the concepts, the different machines and different stories over the years. So this one, I don't know how fleshed out it is. I wrote this back in 2015, so let's see how far we can get with just this. Do you have a Gmail I can send this to? You could just message me
Uh,
it off
yeah, sure.
off stream, and then I'll check it on my other machine. Um, yeah, so this is just go to the Google Drive doc just so you can kind of see the idea. But how do you normally work? Do you still do game design docs? Is that still a thing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely. Yeah,
perfect.
I'm doing one. Actually, I'm doing two right now for just two different clients.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have like a template or anything you want to use, but feel free to, boost
Um,
or edit this or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Just let me just take a look at what let me send you.
Got it.
Okay, just yeah, definitely. There's definitely some templates. There's definitely some, basic essential information. I mean, you can kind of make some modifications for the type of game, but in general, yeah, I could have a template we can kind of work from.
Okay.
Help reorganize information.
All right. So I just marked this as the original concept, and then we can, I don't know, make a new page here, and we'll call this work down at the bottom. But yeah, okay. And then I will pull this up. Okay. It's here. right. And let me know if you got any trouble getting into that.
Let's see. Let's go here.
Perfect. All right.
Okay. Okay.
So I honestly haven't even read this since the day I wrote it. So let's just. I mean, I have an idea in my head, like the basics of what I expect, especially for the prototype. But we can go over this. This has some ideas for like multiplayer and stuff. I don't think we're gonna need all of that right away.
Okay.
But we'll see how far we can get using your template or whatnot. So are you in here? Are you able to edit?
Second here. I'm looking at your screen here. Hang on. Just a sec. Okie dokie. Here I am.
Awesome. I see you there. So yeah, feel free to paste in your template or if it works in Google Docs or whatever. But for now, let's just go over this together and kind of pull out the main ideas here, and I'll give you some thoughts, and you can let me know if you have any questions.
Sure.
But yeah, the basics are so this is going to be a 3D game in Unity, probably third person over the shoulder camera. The prototype's gonna be in a single room, um, and so a player begins in one room with multiple portals, or I'm thinking even doors maybe. Player enters the portal and exit in the same room at a different time. I guess I player enters the portal and exit. Right. So it's like think Portal. You ever play Portal? I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
Green and orange portals, but in this case. I guess my first question is: do you pop out? Where do you pop out? Like, if I was originally thinking like a room with four doors on it,
Mm-hmm.
north, south, west, east, west. Maybe you pop out in the opposite door or something like that. But that's
Yeah.
definitely a question. The player may. So here's the key part: the player may encounter themselves at a different point in time once the timeline has been written.
Okay.
So for the UI, basic, just to start, I imagine like a clock in the top left that's like says 5 p.m. and then it's going up like every second is like a minute probably
Mm-hmm.
in game time. And you're walking around this empty room to start, and you got a clock that's ticking up. Then you go through a door, and now all of a sudden that clock jumps to like a past or future time. So how is a timeline written? Well, if the game starts at 5 p.m. and the player travels back to 4 p.m., the player will see himself spawn after an hour passes in the game. If you just sit there for an hour of game time, because the timeline from the point after the user spawn has been written. The original instance will see the new instance walk into the portal and disappear. So the old version of yourself is going to have some kind of AI where it tries to do exactly what you had done, because this is
Mm-hmm.
that is another instance of you. It's like a shadow of you,
Mm-hmm.
but it gets a little more complicated if you try to interact with it. Let's see what I say here. Um, if the original instance falls, the new instance into the portal a few minutes later, the two instances of the player will appear exactly at 4 p.m. in the same location this time. So it keeps adding. So we'll probably have to have some cap on how many times you can do this. Otherwise, you could just spam and have a
Sure.
thousand versions of yourself. So that's another game mechanic we'll have to figure out. Ultimately, I
Okay.
want this to probably be kind of a puzzle, kind of, but also story driven mystery type thing. I don't quite
Mm-hmm.
have all the ideas fleshed out for the mechanics. Let's see what I do have here though. Right, but if the original instance then travels to 5 p.m. in a different portal, the player will see a new instance spawn just as before, but he will also see the instance he just left behind, the second instance ever spawned. But he will not see himself because he left that timeline just after 4 p.m. So, kind of complicated example, but we can draw it out on a timeline if it helps. But I think that rule is solid. If you, I don't know, I might have to reread it to make sure, but I think that's valid the way I wrote it. The original instance would watch the other two instances walk into the 4 p.m. portal and disappear. If this original instance decides to travel into the future to a timeline that hasn't been written yet, like 6 p.m., then the player will see no other instances, because no one has ever existed in that time before.
Mm.
So, meaning of the name here, so it's just kind of inspiration, I guess, to help us out here, set the mood. There will be no paradoxes in this game, no matter what the user does. Even though it gets confusing, it will never contradict itself. So, part of why I really want to make this game, and I want to set up the rules as like a sandbox and then just play with it and see what comes out. That's kind of why I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing the prototype and
Yeah.
parallel, is that like see what kind of game mechanics would be fun based on whatever, I'm just messing around. I set up the rules of this. I walk through a door and now there's two instances of me, like, and just see how that kind of plays out and what fun I can have there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there's no paradoxes, and I mean this like if you ever watch a time travel movie, they always try to have some kind of conflict where it ends up being like, oh, the guy was there all along. He was in the background, but you didn't see him. And there's always some rule to time travel, like sometimes a lot of the times if they're lazy they'll be like there can't be two instances of you in the same room at the same time or the universe will explode or something, right?
Right.
so
Right. Right.
so
Right.
this same concept here of like what would happen if there's two of you in the same room. I kind of really
Yeah.
want to explore that.
Yeah.
So that's the inspiration here, and I call it pseudo paradox because it's obviously possible because I have game rules that allow it, and this idea of a finite timeline, or I guess an always moving, like you're always following the perspective of yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
like maybe from an outside perspective, it's not possible. It's a paradox. Like this is not possible, but in real life, I guess. But in this game world, when you're viewing it through one person's like journey, it's not going to be linear time, but there's only going to be one of them traveling through all these points, and so it's not a paradox. It's just
Right.
the rules.
Right. Right.
So how do you end the game? Well, the game will naturally have to have limits since continually walking to the same pass portal will spawn an infinite or indefinite amount of instances. We could shut down the portals after a while, or we could introduce an object that requires going through certain portals in certain orders at certain times. And if the user gets too far off track, they could lose the game. They could beat the game by accomplishing all of the objectives that we set out of beforehand. It could be like an escape room, like you gotta do some pattern or some, like I was thinking. Well, let me finish reading and then we can talk over ideas. But
Yeah.
it gets crazy. But let's see. They could beat the game by accomplishing all of the objectives. There could be multiple levels with different portals and totally different objectives. For now, I'm just thinking a single room, and let's see if we can get like even one puzzle out of that.
Mhm.
And that would be a good start. Um, multiplayer. So I don't. We're probably not going to really go anywhere with this right away, at least. But we could introduce two characters in the game in split screen or online. Each player could start out in the same timeline, and one player could be given a head start to jump through any portals they wanted, and the second player could follow and try to find the original instance, possibly to kill it. Or they could start out in different times and have to find each other. We could introduce mechanics for leaving messages behind somehow from one time to the next. Perhaps we give the users an object to carry and leave behind in certain timelines and to throw through portals. So kind of there could be like a hide and seek or like a treasure hunt type. Like I always liked, playing with like as kids or even playing with my nephews and nieces, like doing treasure hunts and hiding things. So I think a multiplayer could be really fun to explore. But I would say it's out of scope for this original game design doc that we're doing.
Yeah.
The portals, most likely the portals that are placed throughout a level will not indicate what they do. They will also most likely not change location. It's possible that portals could change after set times. So like if you wait in a room for a half hour, then all of a sudden the portal changes red or the door changes red, which indicates it goes back in time instead of forward. I don't know. We could come up with some mechanic with that as well. But it could get really confusing. So we'd have to have really good indicators of what are the rules, especially for the first level. I think like if you look at Portal and Portal 2, like they have really good tutorials of setting up the rules, so starting off with basic puzzles. And I think we're going to want to do something similar to that. But I think for the sake of like seeing how good this game could be, it might be good if we start off with like a decent puzzle, like where there's actually four doors, just so you can see how complex it can get. And then obviously when we make, if I make a final game, I can have simpler puzzles to ease the user into it. I guess I added an update. This is the most advanced thing. I guess. Oh, okay, these are other random notes. Ignore those. All right, this is the end of it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, what are your thoughts, and what direction would you take this, like, to get us started?
Yeah. No, it's a really cool concept, and it's something, like you said, it's pretty fun to explore. Couple of reference touchstones it makes me think of are like Day of the Tentacle. I don't know if you played that back in the day.
No,
It was an early LucasArts adventure game where you could go forward and backward in time. It's a very different kind of thing, kind of a very different sort of presentation. But you could do things where you could like get an object from the past and bring it to the future. Do that. Like it was basically it was temporal, but they were also essentially they function as locations, right? Like there's something in the past that's useful for some purpose in the future. You can bring items back and forth, that kind of thing. The other one that kind of makes you think of a little bit, and there might be some mechanical ideas in there for this, is The Last Express, which was, what is his name? Jordan, the guy that did the Prince of Persia games. It was one of his first games. And it was a real-time game. Blade Runner was a real-time game too, where the game works on a clock and certain events happen at certain times, right? So you start playing it and things are going to play out over, whatever the length of your play session is. And in your case, in those games, they were linear time, right? But the idea was that you actually use the clock as a mechanic to go backwards into time to do things that you missed, right? Mm-hmm. Or like once you got a sense of what was going on, you could rewind it and redo it. And that kind of grew into like the Prince of Persia Sands of Time idea. But it could be kind of interesting. One thought is like if your game was playing out with a timeline and certain things were happening at certain points, and you had to first figure out what those things were, why they were significant, and then figure out how to be in the right timeline at the right time, if that makes sense. So for instance, there's in the past there was a train leaving at a certain time, right? And somebody gets on the train, and if you're not there at the right time to see it, you don't see who that person is, right? Mm-hmm. You don't realize that that's significant until you're in the future and you need to go back and into the time to have that thing happen. And so then it could kind of be an order of operations puzzle, right? Where it's like go to the past, come back to the present, go to the further past, like that there's a series of like ABC steps you have to do, but they involve going through different portals, right? So that could be one kind of puzzle approach. The other thing that I think about too is depending on what kind of interaction you want to be able to have with your past and present or future selves, you can play these each of your interaction in each timeline could be recorded. Actually, you could have a system that it actually just records all the player action, basically.
I think that's key to the rule, the game engine that we're creating here is that it tracks all your actions. And I didn't have it here, but I definitely thought about this and talked about it with the dev I was working with yesterday. Is the idea of how you interact with yourself starts out as it's AI trying to do exactly what you did and ignore any other instances of you probably. But if you walk up to it and punch it in its face, it's going to punch you back, right? You didn't punch anyone in that time, but it has some kind of rules of like of defending itself or whatever.
Yeah, it has like a decision tree, like a hierarchy of that makes sense.
So that introduces maybe some kind of combat if we want to go that route mechanic. Like maybe you are trying to kill yourself. I'm just throwing this out here because we're just brainstorming. But maybe you're trying to kill yourself. Like you're trying to be the last instance of yourself surviving. But obviously, if you killed yourself at the wrong time, then you wouldn't exist. So, like, there's got to be maybe something to do with death or killing there that I haven't quite figured out. But, like, I definitely like some kind of combat. I don't just want a puzzle where you pick up an object, take it to another time, and now you can unlock a door and leave necessarily. I think there should be a part of that. I think that could be, like, the overall goals you're trying to escape. But if you had to have some combat to do it, would also be nice. So some timing to it. It's not just you don't have to be smart and figure it out, but you have to also like execute on it and make sure you jump at the right time or punch this guy or whatever.
Right. So then, are you thinking that the primary interaction will be between yourself and your other selves, past and future, or could there be other actors in those? Other events happening in those timelines that you have to interact with as well?
Maybe once we start branching off to like more complicated, like a different level, like maybe we'll have like instead of a single room, maybe you're in a mall or something, right? And there could be other like there's random shoppers doing things that are important or not. But I'm not even saying that's in scope right now. I'm saying let's keep it very limited to just this one room and just other instance of yourself, and see if we can make that fun. Then I think you can make a full game out of it, where then you start bringing in larger environments with other interaction types. But I think just getting this core concept to be fun, even for just like a 10-minute game, would be like the key to what I'm trying to go. Do in the near future.
Yeah. So one thought, like we were saying, you could like the game, you can do whatever actions you're doing in a level. Like if say just for the sake of argument, like just to have some really simple mechanics, like you could have switches, right? Like you're in the room and there's a series of switches you need to activate in a certain order or something, and you play the switches, and then you go into the past, right? And you arrive back where you were just a few minutes ago, pulling the switches, right? The version of you from the previous, the previous version of you would actually have been recorded. The game would have recorded that, and it would play back the pattern as what they call like a ghost, basically. Like it's just, it just would have your past self like doing the exact same thing it was doing, like the order of the switches, right? But you've learned that there's that's wrong, right? Or that you need to do the switches in another order. And so then the thing is, like, you have to interrupt your previous self and maybe prevent it from flipping the
Mm.
last switch or flipping the switches at a wrong order, right? And you could make this even simpler, like abstract it basically. Like for a test, we could just say there's a blue switch and there's a red switch, right? And like, okay, the previous self flipped the blue first and the red next. Then you immediately learn that that was the wrong thing to do, and the world blew up, right? So you get to go back in the past, and now there's your past self going to switch the blue switch first and the red switch first. You have to stop them from doing that, right?
I
So
love
there's your
it.
like conflict, potential combat or something like that, right? If you don't stop them from doing that, they do the same thing again, right? And maybe just for the sake of testing it out, you could just have like a simple score pattern, right, or something like every time you make a mistake, you like get a demerit or whatever, and it could be that like you're trying to qualify to be like the guardian of the past, right, whatever, right. Um, I mean, just to abstract it, it could be whatever you wanted it to, but you could have some marker of progress, right, and then you could progressively make it more difficult, right? You could add more switches, you could add different patterns, right? And maybe then you could also play with the way that there's there's a time limit, right? There's 4 switches and there's a time limit such that one person's never going to do all 4. You have to do 2, go to the future, go back to the past, and the other you has to do the other 2, right? So you could play with that kind of thing too. um, but I'm wondering if like in a really basic sense, if you just had like a simple action you had to carry out, and then you realize it's wrong, the future self has to go back and stop the previous self from doing it.
I like it.
That
Oh,
might,
I,
yeah.
I love it. Okay, so working off of that,
Hmm.
what if the end goal is to get out of the room,
Hmm.
um, and you know that something's going to happen at 10 p.m. Like there's a time, like let's find a way to indicate that, right? Or
Right.
maybe a bomb's ticking and you got to get out before it explodes, or
Yeah.
something that tells you that you have until this time, and then yeah, some actions you take speed that up, or maybe once you get to that time you cannot exit the room or the bomb blows up or because of some past action, so then you have to undo it. Okay, but yeah,
Yeah.
the overall goal should be, I think, for this one, just to get out of the room at a certain time. So how do we,
Right.
let's start there, like how do you, let's just put it as a question. um, if overall goal, actually let's put it here. um, if overall goal is to get out of the room at say 10 p.m. How do we indicate that to the user? So that's like my first general question, but I want that to kind of just be like an escape room type. That's the
Hmm.
overall goal. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, as far as scoring goes, maybe if it's like minimize how many jumps you do, maybe that could be a way to score it.
Sure.
Um, but I'm also think it's a little that brings it in a little more into the arcadey realm, like arcade type thing. I'm thinking less scoring and more. There's different ways to beat it, and
Hmm.
that's the satisfying thing is replaying it to just try different steps.
Yeah.
Possibly do it in less steps is like a you get a reward for that, maybe an achievement. But
Hmm.
I'm not loving the idea of actual score. But I
Hmm.
agree, there's got to be some indicator of progress, or at least like this is your goal and you just failed it, or because
Right. Well, I mean,
maybe
the
it's not
clock.
even a restart mechanism. Like you failed, you got a score of 10. Maybe it's you always play a set time of 15 minutes. I don't know about that. Let's just say that. So let's say you play a set time of 15 minutes max, and at the end of it, you didn't get out of the room. So then you play again. That could be a way to
Yeah.
restart. But I don't necessarily like the idea
Well,
of
the other thing.
dying unless. Well, see, I'm not going all over the place, but I guess if you know your old self killed you, then yeah, I guess that would be a fair way to die.
Right.
but not like you press the wrong
So
switch and you died.
yeah. So one thing you could do is, I mean, it could just be a countdown, right? Like you could start it with just 2 minutes, right? You have 2 minutes to get out of the room. Right, and you could represent that by the time, right? So 10 p.m. or midnight or whatever, and you can abstract the way the time actually goes. It doesn't have to be real time, right? Like,
Right.
so you could just basically, I mean, well, there you would have like an instant sort of like scoring mechanism if you wanted it, which was just the faster you do it, the better you do, right? Like you have 2 minutes to get out of there, but you can get out of there faster, and that can be sort of your replayability thing. So one thought is there might be things that like, so okay, let's just, I guess let's take it, let's just break it down. What are the things that will prevent you from getting out of the room, right? Are there obstacles? Is it navigation based? Is it knowledge based? You know, are they obstacles, or are they abilities, right? Like, is it a matter of like navigating the room, and is the navigating the room that you have to use abilities to do that?
So
Or you have to interact with objects or overcome obstacles, right?
I'm sharing my screen right now, and I was just pulling up YouTube here of Little Nightmares. I don't know if you've played it or heard of it.
I've heard the name, but I haven't played it yet.
It's my wife just went through the second one, and she went through the first one. I watched her play the whole thing. It's really cool. But I kind of wanted to draw, and I don't know how much you get into the design of like you're not an artist, right? But like how much you get into like how much does the art design affect the actual design and mechanics of the game, right? Like there's some overlap there, right?
Yeah. Spatially, I mean, the design is very much about how you move through the space, and absolutely, from a design standpoint, you can design the puzzles and the space and everything, and just have it abstracted as like blocks, and then you work with the artist to like add the visual information to it.
So, but, are you seeing the video I just played?
Yeah.
I thought this was more. Actually, that was a good example of it. It was a long video. I thought it was more side scroller. And sometimes it is like this. It's more locked in, but I don't want that. But I really love this scene here where he was just pulling. I lost it now, but where he was pulling that rack across the room.
Yeah.
And he had come down from the stairs. I really do like that perspective. I don't want to completely rip off this like side view. I don't like that, but I do like it when it's a room. But I guess in this game, the perspective might not ever turn around. It's almost like you're watching a stage. And then there's these shots that are more horizontal.
Yeah.
So there's these. I'm not looking for that. I'm trying to find that example where he walked down the stairs and then. I think
where was it? Was that in the beginning?
Was
that further back?
I think I just skipped. Is this the whole gameplay?
Yeah.
Spoilers. I don't remember where that was. That was just like a perfect scene, though. Did you see it?
Was that it? The lighting's so similar in a lot of them.
Yeah, I'm just kind of rushing through it, but maybe some stairs here. Maybe this is closer. But yeah, either way, we'll figure out the art later and stuff. But the idea that you're possibly moving around furniture is an example of something that I think would make sense for this game.
Right. Okay.
So I don't know why I thought of this. What were we talking about exactly? Oh, what is the mechanic, right?
Yeah. So pushing blocks out of the way, or creating a surface to climb up on or jump up on, or that kind of thing, right? So then the question is to explore, like, how does the temporal shift create advantages or disadvantages in that mechanic, right? One thought that comes to mind immediately is that you need. Okay, so here's an example, right? Like let's say that, what's the best way to think of this? Okay, so there's going to be multiple U's, right? Um, so U number one, right? U number one is the first U that plays in the level and has to get out in a time limit and can't do it, right?
Right.
Because
It has to.
you need future U's help, right? So, but that gets recorded. Their progress gets recorded. Um, the second U comes back into time to basically, it's almost like a relay race, right? To pick up where U number one left off, or possibly to do some action that helps U number one complete something, right? But U number two also gets to a point where it needs help, right? So then you have U1 playing out its pattern, U2 playing out its thing to try to help U1 a little bit more or to get further than U1, a la the relay race, carry the baton. U3 comes in to follow the last little bit, right? In each instance, you could try to do small things to tweak or to improve, right? Or to maybe take over for the previous one. So the question then is like, how many U's do you have to get in there so that a U from any timeline gets through the door and it's possible that the time limit, maybe the time limit works, maybe it doesn't, but the basic idea is like a U from some version of U, some instance of U needs to get through the door to escape. And how many U's is it going to take? And maybe that's actually the skill, the score mechanic, is how many U's do you need to do it, right?
Mm.
Like maybe by default you kind of tune the level so that it probably takes like 6 or 7, right?
Mm.
But maybe there's ways to do it with fewer. I don't know. That there's a lot of things that kind of you have to get into, like, the sort of abstraction of it. But one way where you could modify that is rather than like changing their progress necessarily, you can gain time when you go back. You can speed them up, right? So let me just think through this for a second. I might need to do something I can share. So basically, like, you have a U that needs to get across the room and in a certain amount of time, and it could be divided into several sections of its travel, and each section takes like 10 seconds to complete. There's 4 of them, right? If a new U from the future comes back to help, they could possibly do something. For instance, the U1, the previous U, walks across a conveyor belt, but the conveyor belt's turned off, right? But they just run across it because it's in the room. It takes them 10 seconds to run across the conveyor belt shut off, right? U2 comes back into the past, finds the switch, and when U1 is on the conveyor belt, they can turn the conveyor belt on, and now U1 can get across the conveyor belt in half the time, right? So they recover the time. So in that sense, your previous U would follow their same path that was recorded, but you'd build things into it that would allow them to speed up in places. And you need multiple U's to come in to help them. And then maybe you could explore also that with like combat situations as well, right? Maybe there's a way
I, I, I
play
just
with that.
I just realized we're gonna have trouble like expressing which instance the person is, because you're technically always U1. You're always U1, right? So
Right.
in your example, I love that example. Let's go with that, but I want to find a way to write it down so we don't lose it, right? So the conveyor belt is turned off in the beginning, right? And U1 runs across it and takes 10 seconds to get to the door that takes them back in time, right? Now, U1 is now back in time and sees U2.
So it goes
Or
backwards.
would we say U minus one, and then we
Yeah,
go,
maybe
that
U minus 1.
U minus one,
Sure.
running towards the door, U1 can turn the belt on, and U-1 would reach the door faster. Okay, I think that works. And so then, following that, U1 got there faster, but the original concept of the idea is, so that guy's still gonna go into the same door because that's what he did the first time, but now he's gonna do it faster.
Right. If the goal is just to get out of the room, right? So maybe I guess
So like
you're thinking
maybe
that.
maybe a gate's coming down and he's trying to run
Yeah,
under it before
yeah,
it closes. I see.
yeah. Totally,
And
totally.
then you didn't reach it, so that's why you went through the portal to go back in time.
Right, right. Exactly.
I see.
So you have portals which they're doors, but they're really portals, right? They're mechanics. They're mechanical devices, and you have a door that's the exit, right? And so it's basically like, it is kind of the escape room theory. Like, can you get out of the room before X happens? And no, you can't do it unless you get enough of your new selves.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, like you're saying, the old selves go further back in time to come in and find ways to help them get out, right? Or to stop obstacles, right? Or, like you said, maybe what's really interesting is you can then shift it and be like, you realize that they made a mistake and you have to go back and stop them from doing that, right? So yeah, I feel like if you wanted to abstract it, one way to approach it is, and this is sort of one of the sort of game design approaches, is just to sort of get mechanics and situations and then see if you can repeat them, right? So it's sort of like, if you sort of think about like a Zelda game or something like that, like it's just a bunch of mechanics and situations stuck together in different ways to make puzzles, right? Like there's pushing a block, there's shooting, there's throwing the boomerang to activate a switch, there's the dash, there's these other things, right? And they're all basically like problem solving mechanics. So if we came up with the idea of, if you like this or if you find something else, like what are the like granular mechanical bits you could do? Like the conveyor belt is one, right? Maybe there could be one with like the timing of an elevator going up or something like that, right? Or the timing of some other, basically you could take it like any sort of like platform internals, right? Anything that's moving that needed to move faster or slower, right? Or getting under the door before it closes, that kind of thing. So
I like I like I like the idea that the different versions are not ghosts; they're actual in the flesh, and they have collision. So I'm
mm-hmm.
thinking getting some mechanics with colliding or fighting or picking up and throwing or
Mm-hmm.
in like Fortnite they have a really cartoony mechanic. So when your buddy is downed, you pick him up and you can chuck them like 10 feet. I kind of like that idea of being
Yeah.
able to pick up a person or maybe do a like in Little Nightmares. There's an AI that helps you sometimes, or you help them. Basically, it goes up to the wall and it holds its hands out, so you could step up on it and give it a lift, or you do that to
Yeah.
it. I like that idea.
Yeah, or jump on its shoulders or
Yeah.
something like that. Or I mean, so you could do that too if you played with, multiple ones where like you might need four of them to get on each other's shoulders to get to a high enough spot, right? Or however you want to scale that. Also, like going down, like descending down, like you could have to have like a chain of them holding hands, like one holding the foot of the other, holding the foot of the other, something like that.
Holding hands, creating some kind of barrier to block something. I do like that.
I mean, you could also just be shielding the other one, right? Like if you wanted to like, if you wanted to explore like the a combat kind of idea or something like that, like you could have to provide cover for a previous self or something like that, right? Or distraction, or
That kind of kind of leads into something that I think I really want in the game, but I worry that it's going to take it to the next level, like complicating things. But I really want smart AI here that knows to put its hand and let you jump up for some reason. But I was thinking a way to do that would be, I mean, the AI can have like a state model that's aware of like, okay, there's an open window here and you're running towards it, so I'm going to give you a boost. But I'm not sure about that. I like this idea possibly of the older versions of you could be combative, right? They could be pissed at you, or so depending on your actions, it's going to behave differently. But even better, depending on your past actions, it's going to behave differently. So that's where it gets really complicated. But say that. Um, so the instance of you that was flipping switches, right? Maybe they got zapped. They flipped the wrong switch and it zapped them. So that guy now, his temper has gone up. So that when you walk up and push that guy, he's gonna punch you.
Mm.
Whereas a guy who has a lower temper gauge or whatever at that state, like you obviously carry the character qualities along with you. So like I will
Mm-hmm.
now have as much temper as him because he had it. Maybe I have to cool down or something, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that the next instance of me when I time travel again, he's going to have you know carry on the traits, right? So maybe you take advantage of those traits of saying, hey, I need a version of me that's calm and collected, and a version of me that's angry, and I need
Mm-hmm.
to have one of them beat the other one up or something.
Mm-hmm. So, and you basically, and at that you're thinking that it would actually, you'd need some sort of ledger or tracking system of mood or state, right, or state of mind, I guess, um, from each instance, and then that would be somehow cumulative, like it would actually like be informed by. So it's almost like you have sort of a running score that applies to each of them. Mm. Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's do this again. So example one, we'll just call this state. 'Cause I think this might be. So uh, take this. Oops. Take. Oh man, what did I just copy? Oh, those are my tags from the video. Okay. So timeline one, you won. Anger 0. Um, uh, this would add another layer too, but hungry 0, and just like one more would be it's a good one. Strength. Maybe you fight better later. Um, and then in the second instance, so like after you've teleported once, U1 is anger 1 because you're frustrated because you haven't, I don't know, stubbed your toe. You're starting to get hungry, and we'll say this is it's out of 10, so let's just say you're 5, and then your strength is, you did some push-ups, and then there would be an old instance of you, so U minus 1 is always going to be hungry 0, right? Because
Oh, is it what it was previously?
before you left the room, you had not leveled up, right? Let's say that you
Right.
didn't level up till you got to 2.
Yeah.
But what's where it gets complicated is say you stay in timeline 2 for a while, right? So it's really timeline to start, right? Like that's your starting,
Mm-hmm.
and then your end. So start end, just to be clear here. And then this guy, he's gonna be he's gonna be more angry. Well, I guess he inherited it, to be fair. It should be the 0, 0, zeros, and then it becomes what I said before. Something like that, right?
Or wait, would it be the start? You start at 0, but by the end of the level you're at 1. So then when you come into the next level, you're at 1. You're already up. You're leveled up.
Are you thinking that just traversing is what caused the change? Because
Yeah, yeah.
I was thinking during this timeline you did some push-ups, so that's why you got strength.
Oh, okay.
Maybe hunger is changing, right? Maybe
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it seems
that.
like energy or something
Yeah,
burning all the time. Right?
let's do that then. I guess it could be more realistic. Uh, Hunger would change, so let's at least add that one. But I want some passive, and I want some that you actually have to work towards. Anger is maybe when you fight, and strength is when you work out. What these are placeholder, but so when you're done, then your hunger is at I guess let's just do 3, and then so you start out it's 3 here, and this guy he started at 0 because you started at 0, but then he ended up at 3 and you ended up at 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he only gained strength because he did something here that he didn't do here. And then
During the course of the level, you're saying, yeah,
right, and then
push the box or something there.
yeah, and then the same thing here, except now we have a u minus 2, which let's think. Okay, so with this, let's see if this is the real test if the minus naming convention really works. Is u minus 1 the same u minus 1 here, or is u minus 1 now? That's
Right.
where it's confusing. But let's say let's say it is.
Yeah,
See
it's
if
probably
that
easier to
works.
say it is because
And then yeah, so we know that u minus 1 came out with 3, or started with 3, whereas this u minus 1 started with 6, or u minus 2 started with 6 because it's from timeline 2. So that kind of works. 2 from instance 2, and this is obviously the simple case where someone is going back to the same, going back an hour, going back an hour, going back an hour, right? But so this is gonna be a hard game to design, but it's kind of going to be really cool to code the rules of, because it's easier to design when you're going back an hour. But once I code the rules of it, you can go forward an hour, back to, stay in a room for a half hour, stay in a room for 2 minutes, and it's going to remember each state of all the past selves and instances as you go, right? So that's what's going to be really cool to play with, but it's going to be hard to write, I guess.
Yeah.
So this one was 6, we said, and this guy he's not 3. You are now start at 6, just like this guy does, and
You could also, I mean, for the design purposes too, we could also probably just put it in a spreadsheet and just add the formulas to it so that each time you do it, it just increments it.
That's a good idea.
Just to test it out, right? Just to like test out assumptions. But you say so okay, just to clarify then, you're thinking that like hunger maybe is a persistent thing, right? It's basically just a use of energy. But anger and strength are perhaps based on, they're affected by like actual events or actual things that you do, right? Like
I think
you are angered or you are made stronger by some action.
I think that would make more sense. And I guess it could. The point here is anger would go down probably at a different, like if you calm down, strength would keep going up. Unless you lost a fight, maybe, I don't know. And then your hunger is going to just keep going up. But I think I might have messed up here. Let's finish this one. So what would this be then? This is always going to be what it was at the end of this round. Wait, no.
Yeah, the previous round.
Well, yeah, so actually it should have been 0 to start, because he starts... Wait, why is...
U1 starts with 3.
I should be looking at this one.
Yeah, you should be looking at the first one. Yeah.
So U minus 1 ends with 3. So in this case, U minus...
It's
so confusing.
So
it should be the same. It should be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then at the end, he's always going to end up the same. Always. Same thing with 2. Right. 2 is now going to be whatever 1 was. This one. So he's going to start out as... No, whatever he ended as.
Yeah, whatever he ended as.
No, no, no. Two is gonna be, sorry. Two is gonna be what he started as. So two is now 0, 3, 0. But he's going
Hmm.
to end as whatever he ended at last time. So 2, 6, 3. And then you, 1, you're the main prime you, is going to keep changing. So you had started at 2, 6, 3 because that's what you ended at. But you brought your anger down, your hunger up, and your strength up. Yeah, I think that's valid. And maybe that
Yeah,
spreadsheet would work better.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, because it's one. So,
So this makes it more sci-fi than puzzle, which is what I want, right? It's like
hmm
in
hmm
these time travel movies, you're always interacting with an old version of yourself, and they freak out or whatever, or you're trying to trick your old self by
mm,
now you're older and you don't recognize yourself. There's always some element of the person you used to be is not the person you are now, and how would you interact with your
yeah,
past self? That's the core of what I want to capture, and that's kind of why I want to work with you as well, because I want to work on the not just the mechanics. We got to figure that out, but I kind of want to tell a story here. I want to have this really cool world. Maybe we can pull from Blade Runner or whatever. All the, I like robots too. Maybe we have robots in here or whatever, right? I want to flesh out that side of it too, and then the mechanics. I kind of just want to set a thin base layer here of something I can prototype, and then
hmm
we can come back to it and say, you know what, we played it. It's actually not really fun to have, I don't know, movable bookcases or whatever, right? And so
hmm
I want to leave that very loose, and we can kind of work out the mechanics as we go. And I
hmm
want to spend our time maybe fleshing out the story a bit more, and the feel of the game.
Okay, okay. Um, yeah. So this kind of this kind of approach makes me think that yeah, it's more. Uh, well, so I mean, for lack of a better term, it's these attributes are almost like they're emotional states, or there's like um their states. It's more about the relation between like the change in those states over time, right? And the kinds of interactions you can have that impact those changes, right? Like the anger is um, implies a certain way that you would be interacting with each other, um, and then to me, hunger just it feels like an energy system, right? Which
Energy, yeah, it's
is valid, and
totally valid.
strength is probably tied into like I mean, it implies to me that there's going to be a benefit to it over time, but it also, like you said, implies that you can do a lot with conflict, right? Combat or something like that. Because if you think about it, future selves would be stronger than previous selves, right? So if you did want to explore that dimension of it, you might have you might have an interesting so okay so one thing that makes me wonder is like it's interesting to think that like each each self could have different advantages, right? Um so maybe like if the first self has zero hunger, maybe they have max energy, right? But they have low strength. But a future self would have higher strength and maybe lower energy,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
So like it just makes me wonder like what are the how can you exploit like the differences in those things, right? Like like a future self might be more angry, but if a previous self is less angry, maybe there are advantages to being less angry. You know, um there's there's things either objectively or even just through the story that change because you are more clear-headed, right? Um
Yeah.
so that you kind of have like a continuum, right? Like you have one axis, you have one grid line going up, improving in some functions over time, but then improve just going down in others over time, right? So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily that like future selves are always going to be better. They might be better at certain things, but they might, be decreased at some stuff, right?
Yeah, I
It's
think for placeholder or the way I was envisioning it, you correct me if I'm missing something here, but the way I envision it is the first one is fluctuating based on interactions. Like your anger, let's say your anger is automatically going down towards zero, and so if you get punched in the face, immediately goes to 10, but then slowly dissipates back to zero, right? So that one fluctuates over time. So that's going to be fun to play with. How to manipulate characters based on time, right? And then energy is going to be again time, but it's always going to be going down. With obviously maybe you can find a banana hidden under the sofa, and then it goes up, whatever, right? But that one's mostly going down, right? And maybe you die if you lose it all, right? Strength, I do see that as more maybe not even strength the right word, but because technically you could lose strength over time, but I see that one more as like experience points. Like that one's always going up, and the latest version of yourself always going to have because you want that version to win. Also, I think that I'm not saying for sure, but I think the goal should be to have the version that you're being be the one to escape. I think if you help an older version of yourself escape, I don't think that should count. I think you're competing versus your old self almost. So you want to be the one to escape. So you're always getting more and more skills, and you're finding ways to manipulate your past selves.
So in that sense, our past selves, would you think of them more as like resources to take advantage of, or enemies to overcome? I mean, and maybe that's a false dichotomy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, maybe both, but yeah, I definitely see them as the whole idea of there not being any paradoxes is that this is not a single timeline. This is the timelines are split, and so if you kill an old version of yourself, if it was a single timeline, you wouldn't exist. You would die too. But no,
right.
this is the time travel, and I just watched a really good indie movie on this. I forget what it's called, but basically every time they went through this time portal, it was the current time, but when they came back, they were only gone for a few seconds, even if they were gone for days. So it gave them this advantage that they were able to just basically get more time in their timeline by living over there, building some code and bringing it back. Now they had like some app or something built in hours
They
instead
could
of
use it,
weeks,
right?
or right. That was one part, but the reason I bring it up is every time they went through, it was a different universe. So they actually, spoilers, they actually went over and they robbed themselves. They stole
Right.
stuff from themselves, or like stole their version of their wallet, and went out and spent all the money. Went back to their time, go through again, and now they're in a new world where that guy was never robbed.
Right.
It's not,
Right.
yeah. So it's a new timeline every single time, and there's no consequences. I don't know if the no consequence thing quite lands. I think it does. There's no consequences for the version in through the mirror. They were going through a mirror, right? And maybe we could use a mirror instead of a door. Now that I think about it, but the version through the mirror, there's no consequences for you. You go back, and yeah, maybe you now have an app that you built, or you took his money back with you, I guess. But the version of you that was over there, you never okay, in that movie you never see them again, so it's a little different, I guess, because you can never get back into that timeline. And so this is different because you keep seeing your old versions over again, and you technically keep interacting with them. But
So it kind of blends
it
the two
blends it a bit.
basically.
But basically, the
Yeah.
idea is you don't care about them emotionally. Like they can die, and it's whatever.
Yeah. 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 Okay. But I guess what I was getting at is like, you know, do you want the newest instance of you to always be better in every way, or do you want there to be any advantage to an older you? Like, for instance, the example I would think of is, like when it comes to like recording music, right? Like there's kind of, the whole like one take, get it on the first take, right? Because your energy and your focus is higher,
Mm.
or not, maybe not focus, right? But like your like excitement, like enthusiasm, newness, right? Whereas if you took 10 takes to do it, in theory, you'd be 10 times better because you've practiced. But there's also some diminishing returns because you lose sort of that newness, right? It's almost like naivete versus experience, right? Where you will do things when you're naive because you don't know any better.
I
And
I think that's probably going to be the energy level. I think
okay,
the younger version, well,
Is
now that I say it, maybe it literally is a younger version, not just by hours, but maybe we up the scale on this thing, and you see yourself getting old. Because I
yeah,
always like that idea
yeah,
as well. So maybe
yeah.
instead of hours, it's years or something. But yeah,
Well, yeah, because it's like experience versus like youth, right? And so
right.
and again, you could just like experiment with all these things just on
Hmm.
paper, right? Like how that played out. Like one one idea is that the youthful you is maybe the youthful you is stronger, right?
Hmm.
But the older you is wiser and um has an ability. Like you could just basically, it could be like the older you is able to see things. Like maybe there's things that are revealed as you have more experience that you just don't even see before, right? Um, Whereas you have more energy when you're less. I mean, I don't know. Again, like that gets into like what's the relationship? If you always want to look at it as like whatever you did previously is just a resource for the new you to use, maybe that's a cleaner way to do it, right? And that way the new you is always winning. Um, but I think they're both interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like this we can go a lot of different directions. Those are great points. And I think for the age thing, maybe we introduce that when we start talking about the broader scope of the game, like the different levels. Like maybe each level you grow and you're older, and then we start looping back on the levels, and so then you introduce your older self, like from level 5, back into level 1, where there were younger versions of yourself, and that's just like that's this whole idea of having qualities, these levels, energy levels, whatever, but at another scale or whatever. It's like for the one room you're in, you know, you're dealing with a span of a day maybe, but then
Yeah.
the whole over the whole game you're dealing with the span of 100 years, right? Each room
Uh-huh.
could be a decade or whatever it is, and so maybe you do a big 10-year time jump once you get to the next level or something like that. I think that would be a great way to keep it simple, for the prototype for the first room, where we're
Mhm.
only dealing with a matter of hours, but it also lets us maybe play with the idea, uh, when we're coming up with a story, the idea of this like uh, old self and like past self and older, wiser self versus younger, more energetic self. We could start talking about doing decade jumps, taking
Mhm.
the last level as you going back to the first level, with
Right.
a new objective or something.
Right. 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 Right.
So, I guess to take the best advantage of our time, I think this has all been really great, by the way. But if you have like a template game doc, I feel like that might be good, because then we can kind of be more systematic about making decisions. We can always change them, but like
Mhm.
I remember there was fields like, I don't know, you list the characters in the game and they're
Right.
whatever.
Right.
So if you have a
Right.
template that you want to share,
Yeah.
you can even um, share your screen, or I guess if you paste it in here, it doesn't matter. We both see it.
Yeah. Probably. Well, let's see. Give me a sec here, real
Uh huh.
quick.
Let me be right back. I'm gonna grab something to drink.
Sure. Yeah, a couple of documents templates that might work best. Yeah, it might be easier if
One
I
second.
just take. Oh,
I swear why it's so quiet.
yeah,
Can you hear me now?
yeah,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Wait.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay.
I hear you.
Yeah, it might be quicker. I could pop offline and pull up a couple of different templates and then share them with you. It'll probably take me a few minutes to dig out the best one. Um,
Yeah, I
I,
mean, no worries.
yeah, yeah. I think yeah, there's a couple of different ways we could go with it. Typically, yeah. Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't, if you want to give me about, 15, 20 minutes, I can I'll pop off this call and I'll
Yep.
take a couple of the ones I have and clean them up a little bit and I can pop them in here into this doc. Um, and then we can sync back up if you want for a few minutes and then look it over.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's do that. Go
Okay.
ahead and take some time to do that, and just let me know when you want to sync
Okay.
back up. All right.
Yeah. I'll send you a message in a minute. Okay.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right. Okay. Let's see. Executive summary, projects, creative goals and guidance for design, stories, conflict, structure, architectural systems, attributes, time, inventory, others, controls, player package, camera. Okay. Missions.
Hey,
Marshall.
Randy.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good. So I see the template here.
Yeah. Just kind of a general, fairly generic one, but we can modify it. And obviously, some sections are, if you're just going to jump into more of the nuts and bolts, some are more applicable than others. Don't need to be really have a lot of time spent on them. But yeah, I mean, I guess if the goal is to have a doc that you can also then hand off to to a development team or use as a reference for them. There's most of the key stuff is here. There's probably a few things that are specific to each different design,
Mm-hmm.
but fairly okay place to start. Uh, it seems like there's also just a lot of things that would be like supporting documents that would sort of inform this.
Hmm.
So, I mean, this shouldn't like preclude from doing other sort of design exploration, like and just uh, like iterative work and like
Right.
spreadsheet tables and that kind of thing. So, and the more I think about it, the more I was thinking to um, well, depending on how you want to go, like for instance, with any of these ones in here, any of these systems, I mean, I didn't put combat in here. If combat is a system, there's um, you could there's basically you could set up sort of what we like a resolution combat resolution table or other resolution table. Basically, that's just like how all of the interactions in the game kind of work together. But probably get into a little more of the details on that as we go.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's see. We got like 15 minutes here. We can
Sure.
just fill in some of the stuff we already talked about. Yeah. I mean, I don't expect this to have all the answers, but I just kind of want to nail down some of the stuff that kind of sets the direction for the project. So we can put some in
Yeah.
here.
So a good place to start might even be creative pillars or game principles, and that's a really useful thing in terms of like setting up a check for what the game is and what the game isn't, right?
Hmm.
Like, for instance, like you clarified that story and narrative is is important, right? Like that's a
Yeah.
principle, probably, right? So that like you can have and then you can add details on what those are, but um also like if sort of like the realism factor, I'm not say realism factor, but like if you want it to be kind of more of a have more of an edge, sort of more of a sci-fi feel, less of like a you know um kind of like irreverent puzzly game, right?
Right.
So that's something that's applicable to if I mean, and that's helpful, I think, at this point for both of us, just to kind of and for everyone else you're going to work with, to kind of understand like sort of what are the more important things to it, what are the less important things to it, and you kind of mentioned too that you sort of see it as more of a um I mean, where do you feel like you want it to be on sort of the puzzle solving continuum or spectrum? I mean, that's kind of a generic thing because every game is a puzzle, really, right?
Right.
But in terms of the cerebral faction versus action kind of thing, right?
Um,
Uh,
I would say kind of like Portal, where it's like definitely level based, and you got to solve the puzzle to get out. But at the same time, you're kind of immersed in the world and the story to get out of that. You're kind of unlocking your background as you go, and you're trying to figure out what's going on, and you're trying to use this technology, this game mechanic, to get out of this place. So I feel like we should build a like an ethos around that. Like you're in some kind of world that we create, which is going to be sci-fi based, but and I think it's all gonna be, mostly be indoors. But other than that, like I'm open to ideas. But you're trying to get out, and you're using these time portals to do it, and you're you you're interacting with versions of yourself. So I want that to be a big key to this.
okay, so maybe put that in there too.
it's almost like a what if, if I was this type of person, or get another perspective on your own self as you go through it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
so
not
I
her.
would say puzzles for a reason, or puzzles that are sci-fi driven, or they're like to explore this time paradox and like try to create one and realize you can't, and like the fun of it, of trying to explore but also eventually get out, not like
Mhm.
a puzzle uh, that's too gamey, that's just like inserted in the that's like out of place, but something that's just like, oh, this is a cool world they built and I want to mess around with it, not to have some kind of like key
Contrived.
code that you gotta unscramble or something like that's unrelated, but instead it's time based, the core mechanic of moving around this room and jumping through times to find a way to unlock it, versus, I mean, maybe things like switches, doorways, I could see stuff like that, maybe climbing uh, over barriers, or like we talked about, throwing things, but
Hmm.
not any like mini game puzzles.
Right.
Not.
Okay. So, what are you thinking then, mechanically, in terms of the types of interactions? Uh, Maybe that's a good place to kind of go to. Honestly, that's less about
Okay.
the pillars, but more down here in
Um,
mechanics.
so ultimately, I want you to be able to knock yourself out. Maybe not necessarily kill, but knock yourself out. And I think that could be used as part of like solving the puzzle, because then you can have a version of yourself that is unconscious in one realm or one time period or whatever, and maybe you could position the body or use it to trigger another version of yourself who goes to investigate the body. So knocking out is, I think, going to be key to this. So like Metal Gear Solid type, not necessarily stealth. You could do a GTA style, just walk up and punch him in the jaw and knock him out too. Um, so
Hmm.
probably some kind of fist fighting mechanic, and the AI would fight back, and that have different strengths, or depending on its stats or whatever.
Okay.
So it's fist fighting, maybe melee weapons like objects. Don't really see a reason to introduce guns or anything. Maybe lasers, like a laser gun or something at some point, but probably not.
Okay.
Probably stick to like fists and melee.
Okay. And everything that comes with movement, right? I mean, basic movement,
Mm-hmm.
um, variable speed movement, I guess, right? Run, walk.
Yeah. So yeah, run, walk, crouch, jump, um, throw. Um, I would really like to be able to, like I said, the Fortnite style physics of picking up a knocked enemy and throwing him 10 feet. Not necessarily super realistic, but would be cool. And maybe you're a robot. Maybe that's how we explain it. But
So throw bodies. Uh, pick up objects as well.
yeah, like small, decent sized object, but not like maybe to pick up a couch you need two people or something.
Okay. Run, walk, crouch, jump, throw. Got interaction, fist fight, melee with objects. That way you're.
Yeah, you can pick up a pipe or a lamp or something and use that. Um, and maybe that's the key to this too, is that if I break the lamp, maybe it's a one-time use or whatever, break it over someone's head in one
Mhm.
time, then if I go to the future, it's no longer usable. But if I go into the past, it is.
Mhm. there. Hmm. Okay.
So a big piece of this, I don't know where you're gonna go next. I just wanted to mention.
Go ahead. Yeah,
Do
jump
you
in. Go ahead.
a big piece of this that I haven't nailed down, and maybe we don't need to, but like, what would you say about like the dying mechanic, the failure mechanic, like restarting?
Mm-hmm.
Because like I just haven't really
Mm-hmm.
thought through what that would look like. A checkpoint system, going back to the start, probably. Is that?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems vital to the game, but I don't. Is that something we could figure out later, or should I nail that down earlier
Uh,
than later?
um, yeah, that's a good question. I think honestly, I mean, it's one of those things that's going to obviously be hugely important, but it's also something that in a weird way you can kind of not have to answer when you're initially sort of exploring it, right? Um,
Yeah,
I
maybe
mean,
we'll come out of the prototyping and figuring out what's more fun. And maybe it'd be too frustrating to start over, and we'll need checkpoints or something. It's a good, yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna put that under. Actually, it's not really mechanics so much. I'm put that under systems. Uh, let's see. Yeah, so that would be. Let's put it. Um, okay. Um, okay, so I guess this is an interesting one. Mm, interaction with multiple selves. I guess we want to say that. And I guess obviously that's a big thing, right? I mean, that's almost probably one of the. These aren't necessarily ranked, but that's obviously a key feature that you'll make choices against, which is the goal is to have the multiple selves to interact with, even to the point of like taking on some additional complexity to achieve that, right? Like talking about there'll be a lot, like you said, there's a lot of like problems that have to be solved around who's doing what when, but that's
Mm,
kind of the meat of the thing. Like in terms of a creative pillar, that's something that you don't sacrifice, right? Because it's easier to do something else, like
right.
that's key to it. Um, so it's kind of the feeling with like the creative pillars, right? So for instance, some of the other things that might be less important, you can make choices about, because inevitably when you're going to start working on something, you're going to have to make some, choices about what is more or less important to work on.
Where would you put like environment, mood? I was just thinking about.
Yeah, I could put that in executive summary. There's some other sections in here. Uh, yeah, you could do like, yeah. There's also a section in story summary. Oh, that could go.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I guess we could talk about like next steps and what's the plan there. But I was thinking, I'll start off really slow. I don't know what your availability will be long term, but as much as you can help me,
Yeah.
a couple hours here and there, I'd
Yeah.
appreciate it. And then we can
Yeah, for
see from.
sure.
So I'll just hit you up. It would either have to be evenings on the weekdays or weekends.
Okay.
Probably just be a couple hours at a time or so. Um, if you want, if you have like enough info, and I'm going to post this video too, but if you have enough info on basically what we've talked about so far to
Hmm.
kind of fill out some of these just based on what I said,
Hmm.
and you want to spend, I don't know, 2 hours, let's say, just adding some of that, or come up with your own
Sure.
ideas,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then next time we meet, we can go over those. That's totally cool. But other than that,
Okay.
I don't want you putting in like a bunch of time on this because
Yeah.
yeah, just wait till next time we meet. But yeah, you could put like a couple hours this week or whatever, and then if we meet
Okay.
next weekend,
Sure. Yeah, that'd be
okay,
great. Yeah. I'll fill in some of the sections that I have a grasp on, and then add some ideas, and you can
okay,
review. And yeah, we can sync up next weekend if you want to.
okay, all right, that sounds
Awesome.
good. All right, man. Well, it was really nice meeting you, and I think this is going to be fun, and no matter what we get out of it, so I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah. Likewise, I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Randy.
All right, talk to you later,
All
Marshall.
right. Goodbye.